A very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers and listeners, whether you're joining us via our YouTube channels, SLC Church Channel or SLC Adventist, or you're on Facebook at SLC Adventist. That should be at South Leeward Conference. Or if you are listening via radio on Second Advent Radio, 101.5 FM, or through any of its streaming platforms, we welcome you to Let's Talk. Let's Talk is a program sponsored by the South Leeward Conference of Seventh Adventists. I am your host, Dr. Carson, Greene, president of the conference. And for the last let's say 2 years plus, we have been here with you every Sabbath afternoon discussing issues that are not often spoken of in public. But on Let's Talk, we try to tackle the real issues. This afternoon, we have a special program lined up for you. And I'm excited about this because we are going to be talking to some of our young Adventist professionals around the world. And we want to hear their views of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Before I introduce them, we invite you to have a word of prayer with us. Almighty Father and our God, be with us as we share with our friends and our listeners near and far. We pray that you will grant that the session today will prove meaningful, and be with our guests as they share their perspective. Grant that they will be honest, open, and forthright. We ask God that you will grant that the information will prove meaningful. We will be able to extract from their views and perceptions lessons that we can learn. Take full control and have your own way in Jesus' name. Amen. So friends, again, we are on Let's Talk. And as I indicated, we are going to be talking to young Christian Seventh-day Adventist professionals from various places around the world. This program, beginning today, will run for another 2 weeks. Next week and the following week, we will have a different set of individuals who will be joining us as we discuss their perception, their views, their concepts about church, its relevance. And we have with us, I'm going to allow these individuals to introduce themselves. So one by one, we will just let you know who is with us this afternoon. First, I'm going to introduce out of Georgia, Carol Bennett. Good afternoon and welcome to Let's Talk. Just tell us a bit about yourself.
Happy Sabbath and good afternoon. My name is Carol Bennett, and like Pastor Greene said, I reside in Georgia. I was born in Maryland to my parents, Erith and Paulette Bennett. I have an older sister, brother-in-law, and I am currently a cardiac ICU nurse at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia.
Delighted to have you with us this afternoon. Welcome. And
Thank you.
We're looking forward to hearing your views and your perspectives. So we are going to come closer home now. We have out of the South American country of Guyana, Paul Harris. Paul, welcome to Let's Talk.
Thank you, Pastor. It's a privilege to be a part of your program this afternoon. As you would have mentioned, I'm Paul from Guyana, the land of many waters. In Guyana, I serve as a crop extension officer with the Ministry of Agriculture. I also lecture at the Guyana School of Agriculture. I'm married and I have the opportunity of working with the young people in the Guyana Conference. I served as the National Youth Ministries Coordinator for 2 years, and currently I serve as the youth rep on the executive committee of the conference. And so I'm certainly delighted to be a part of this program this afternoon to share my perspectives on the issues that we're going to discuss.
Delighted to have you. I'm looking forward to hearing your views, your concepts. All right, then we have, I'm seeing on my screen a couple, Dr. Lauren Jale. Did I call the name correctly?
It's Jelly.
Jelly. All right. Well, and I'm assuming that this is your husband beside you.
Yes.
All right. Well, can you both introduce yourself? You are coming to us out of Massachusetts, I believe.
Yes. So my name is Lauren Tiana Lightborn Jelly, and I am, let's see, I'm a woman of faith. I hail from all over. I was born in Canada. My mom is Jamaican. My dad's parents and his family are from Bermuda. And so I'm definitely Afro-Caribbean, and I am in Massachusetts area, just recently located from sunny California. I just graduated from Loma Linda University School of Medicine, and I am applying to psychiatry this year. By the grace of God, I will be a psychiatrist. So that's a little bit about me.
Wonderful. And your husband?
Yes, and I'm Arnold Jelly, born and raised in Zimbabwe, and now also currently residing in Massachusetts. Yes, that's pretty much most about me. I did, right now I'm currently in my profession. I'm currently working as a research and development engineer in polymer, the field of polymer science and material science, yes.
I have a very good friend, in fact, a close relative, close enough. He's married to my niece, but a niece who is like a sister, and he's a polymer scientist. So that's interesting. We talk a lot about those things. All right, then we are going to go to, where do we go now? We're going to go to Memphis. We have Dr. Adrian. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, so my name is Adrian Rowe, currently reside in Memphis, Tennessee. Was born in the Bahamas, left pretty young and grew up in Florida. I am a nurse practitioner. I work in the clinic part-time, but I teach graduate nursing full-time.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to hearing your perspectives. We're going to come back home. When I say home, in the South Leeward Conference, we're going to go to the island of Nevis. We have Craig David. Craig, good afternoon, welcome, and share a bit about yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Craig David. I don't know what to say. My name is Craig David. I'm from Nevis. I'm currently a civil servant, but I'm the Director of Information Technology for the Nevis Island Administration. I'm a youth ministries person. I'm a director of a local Pathfinder club. I'm into AOI. Young people are my thing. And that's who we have to train for the future. I'm very much excited to be a part of this discussion this afternoon.
Wonderful. And finally, we are going to go to, where do we go now? California. We have Edgar Ernest. Edgar, welcome, and share a bit about yourself.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Greene. I just want to say happy Sabbath to everybody, and good afternoon to everyone who's listening. My name is Edgar Ernest. I hail from Los Angeles, California. I was born to Haitian parents in Brooklyn, New York. I lived there for a little while and also lived in Philly. And from Philadelphia, I also lived in Atlanta, and I've been in California for about a little bit over 10 years now. I am a graphic designer and also illustrator and animator in the industry. I also work for the Age of Learning Incorporated, the parent company that is responsible for abcmouse.com and Adventure Academy. I've been there for about 7 years now. And yeah, I'm here to share a little experience about myself and have a little discourse and conversation with you guys.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, let's get the conversation started. First, let's just, again, say welcome to everyone. We're happy that you have taken the time to be with us. Based on where you are, I realize that there's a significant time difference for some of you. It is 3:10 in the Caribbean. Some of you hours on either side. We are delighted for the sacrifice that you have made to be with us. Now, the Seventh Adventist Church considers itself to be the remnant church of Bible prophecy. One of its main mission is to prepare people everywhere for the second coming of Christ. At the same time, the church is also concerned about general ministry, not just preparing people for life in the hereafter, but to have a meaningful existence now. As a young Adventist professional, do you believe that your church is doing a good job at this matter of not just sharing the gospel, but preparing persons to have a meaningful existence now? Let's start with Adrian. You are, I believe, in the health professional. Let's hear your perspective.
Okay, man, it's such a loaded question, and I think that the reality is the church is made up of really local churches, not necessarily like large conferences. And so my perspective is what I see at local churches and being involved in the churches. And I think in a lot of ways we're dropping the ball, quite honestly. I think that there is a significant portion of Adventist young people, my age and younger, who are leaving the church. And, you know, there are conversations that to be had about why, different reasons that why people say they leave. But I think generally we don't do a good job of, one, explaining to the youth. I was talking to a friend last week, and when I was a kid, so my father is an Adventist and my mother isn't. So I grew up learning a lot from what my dad taught me. But quite honestly, I was confused about a lot as well. I think a lot of it wasn't explained in the way where a child and then eventually a teenager could understand. Like I remember a lot of my peers having conversations about, why can't we go to basketball games on the Sabbath? Why can't we do that? And I think we don't do a good job at explaining to young people the why of certain things. And so I think that we could do a better job. I think that would be my answer. Better job in capturing the youth and the young adults, because at the end of the day, those are the group of people that we really want to carry the mantle of the gospel message, right? And so I think we can do a lot better at educating our youth and young adults on important topics. So that'd be my answer.
Okay, thank you so much. I wonder if someone else wants to jump in and add their perspective on that. I mean, I can call names. I know your names. Somebody. Yes, Carol.
Yes. So it's interesting. This question is very interesting because kind of what Adrian alluded to, you look at the church as a whole, and then you kind of break it down into union, conference, local church, and things like that. When you see, you know, the general conference sessions, you're kind of in awe at how amazing the church is. We're so diverse. We make up, you know, we come from so many different backgrounds and cultures, countries, and at a grand scale, things look really great. I think when you break it down into smaller entities, you start to see a little bit of cracks in the foundation. And similar to what Adrian said, I think that there is a lack of understanding of how to relate to people in such a way that makes them enjoy the gospel. And I don't mean that the gospel is boring or anything like that, but I know growing up, I'm Jamaican. Both my parents are Jamaican. You grow up in a more, what people say, conservative household. And here in the United States, that is vastly different. That version of Adventism is vastly different from a lot of other versions that you see. And so I can say personally, growing up, there were things that I was not allowed to do that a lot of people who were Adventists as well were allowed to do. And it kind of showed this schism, I guess you could say, in the body of Christ. But as I got older, I came to understand what it meant to personally have Jesus Christ as my savior. But I think there is this mindset of, well, we do this because this is the way it is supposed to be done, and this is the way it's always done. But when you really break down what Jesus Christ is supposed to mean personally, I think sometimes that gets lost by the wayside. So I guess to sum up all of my statements, I would say the personal relationship with Christ is often replaced with this is how we do things. This is how things are always done. This is the right way. So you must do it.
Well, let me ask you before I go to somebody else. Let me ask you. Uh, you mentioned that as you matured, physically, you also matured spiritually to the point where you came to understand what it really meant about having a personal relationship with Jesus. What role did your church play in that process? Did you get a sense of what it really means to be a Christian from your church, or did you get a sense that, well, they were emphasizing do's and don'ts? Was your church emphasizing relationship with Jesus as opposed to just the legal aspect of it?
So I will really start by saying that my parents laid the foundation for me. We had morning and evening worship every single day. Family worship was not a, if you want to, you can, it was what was done. And so from a child, my sister and I, we learned about the love of God. We learned about studying the Bible, through our parents' eyes. I started as a young child in a Caribbean church. And as I got older, my parents moved to a non-Caribbean church. And that experience was jolting because the church that I grew up as a child, you have this camaraderie, AY, Pathfinders, things, you're at church almost 6-7 days of the week. You're always surrounded, right? But there was a lukewarmness as I left that church and went to a different church that kind of made my parents realize they had to be extra vigilant in making sure that they kept us connected. So I kind of am split down the middle. I say I'd had an early experience with that where the church fostered that in me, and then kind of cooled off as I got older.
Okay, thank you so much. Now we have limited time, but I wonder if anybody else wants to jump in and share a perspective before I move on to something else.
I'd like to share just some of the, I guess, experiences that I've had. Growing up in the church, I was, I guess in my formative years, I was part of things like Adventures and Pathfinders and a lot of activities in the church. And looking back on it, it seemed like a lot of things were like, hey, we need to occupy the children's time and make sure that they are filled with, like, the Sabbath hours are packed with things so that they're not going to get bored, which I appreciate. There was lots of things going on at my church. But I would say for me, when the idea of personal relationship was really paramount, or was really, I guess, hearkened upon me, was when I had to share the gospel with someone else, when I was responsible for answering for my faith and understanding why I believe what I believe, and being able to intellectually explain to someone else why it is I go to church on Saturday, why I don't eat pork, and trying to win people to Christ. So when I was just going to activities and being a part of things, it was it was a fun time, and I praise God for the Pathfinders and the skills that we learned, and like Bible bowl and all those things, but it really wasn't really important to like really know by heart until I had to share it with someone. So I think that was really key. And I think that if we are thinking about sharing it with someone else, then now we're sitting down with the Bible and we're trying to connect it with experiences day to day and how we can bring it up to people in our day-to-day life. And that takes more than just a perusing of the word. You have to actually sit and metacognate and journal and actually like digest and think about God's word. But I would say that where I feel the church misses the ball is when we see things happen in, for me, my context is in the United States, and things like George Floyd, things like Black Lives Matter. We see these things happen in society that are huge, jarring points of like, people are stirred up, people are have questions, people are angry, people are sad, people are confused. And it seems like our focus as a church has just been, hey guys, eat tofu because it'll lower your cholesterol, which, hey, is true. You know what I'm saying? But it's not necessarily meeting people where they are. And I think that we've missed out on a huge ministry opportunity because we don't go where the people are, and we don't necessarily think about how can I reach that person and not only win them to Christ, but also talk to them about very real issues. Because the first question you asked was, are we letting young people be able to live in this world as Christians? A part of what they deal with as a Black man, as a Black woman walking down the street in the United States, driving while Black, you deal with persecution, you deal with racism on an everyday level. And I feel like from the top down, I've seen nothing, and I don't feel seen as an entity. I feel like, yeah, my tithe money is important, but no one is like really talking to the issues that are really important to me.
So you're saying that you believe that a church should be more actively involved in the activism in social issues.
Yes, I think that we're missing out on ministering opportunities by ignoring all of the social activism aspect.
Okay, interesting perspective. Well, let me ask your husband. He's right beside you. I mean, you have a slant, having grown up, I'm assuming, in Zimbabwe, is it? How is Adventism different there to where you are now?
It is similar in a lot of ways. First, just maybe starting there. I think the church as a whole, I think what Edwin had mentioned and what Tori had mentioned before, the church body has a lot of unifying things that bring us together. But as you asked, there are some differences in terms of social issues. Like the social issues that are faced in America are necessarily the same social issues that we face in Zimbabwe. And some of the things, the way we approach it, we might approach it from a more conservative point of view, coming from Zimbabwe versus in the United States. And I'm assuming also it might be very similar to the Caribbean as well. So there are differences in the church, but overall, there is a lot of that unify us as a church. And one thing also that the church, what I've noticed in the church, no matter where we are, our goal and our mission is a very similar mission, and it's a very positive mission that we have. But unfortunately, like what Sharon had mentioned, sometimes you miss on some other opportunities to share that mission with the world and share that vision with the world when, in some situations and in some aspects.
Okay, thank you so much. Now I want to move over to Paul. Paul Harris, you are, I believe you are a professor in a university. You interface with a number of individuals who are not Seventh-day Adventists. How do you feel personally about being a Seventh-day Adventist?
Thank you, Pastor. Yes, I work at an institution where there are lots of Seventh-day Adventists. But for me personally, I count it as a privilege to be a Seventh-day Adventist. And I try to stand out wherever I go. Let me just share with you quickly an experience. While I was studying, at the same institution at which I'm working now, we were able to start a Seventh-day Adventist association with a number of students who were on campus, who were Seventh-day Adventists, persons from different Caribbean islands included. And, every Friday evening, we would have Welcome Sabbath and so on campus. And without forcing anyone, at the end of the 2 years of my period of study there, 2 persons were able to give their lives to Jesus. But apart from that, the respect for Seventh-day Adventists in the institution would have grown. And so the students now have a voice. So for me, I feel privileged being a Seventh-day Adventist. It's an honor for me. And just a second example, quite recently, I had the opportunity of being selected to be a part of the President's Youth Advisory Council. That's the president of Guyana. And at the first meeting of the council, when the president came, the president said, who is Paul Harris? And so I identified myself. And then he said, oh, you're the church man in the group. And so the program was being launched on a Friday evening. It was starting at 4. And then he turned and said that, well, you got to get out here by 6. And while it was funny, I felt good about it, that the head of state could realize that as a Seventh-day Adventist, respecting and honoring God's Sabbath is important. And so I consider it a privilege and an honor.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Now, before you go quickly, do you think that the church is sufficiently appealing to young people, other young Adventist professionals? Your perspective on that before I take that same question to someone else.
Sure. Well, I would say that I have a mixed feeling. If I put it in general terms, I would say that the church is lacking somewhat in its appeal to young people. But when you start to spread it out a little and you zero into some specific churches, there are some churches within the organization that has a very good appeal for its young professionals, Adventists. But then there are others who are lacking. And I said all of that to say that the church needs to create that environment whereby our young people, our young professionals can feel that they are a part of what is happening. And there are many churches where lots of young people just go and they attend the service, but after the service is through, there's no real impact. You're not reaching them. It's as though they feel as though they're just bench warmers. And it's not because they do not want to be actively involved in what happens in the life of the church, but sometimes it's just that they're not given the opportunity. Or when they're given the opportunity, their ideas and their perspective is not valued. And so I believe that a church, some churches provide that opportunity for young professionals to feel a part of what is happening. But as a whole, I think we can do much better.
I would like to hear your take on that question.
Well, what Paul said, definitely I can understand, because even in the United States and even just in California, not a lot of churches, some churches, I'll say, some churches are helping young professionals by kind of placing them part of the worship or helping them with church community activities. And then there are some churches out there who, just like you said, are just bench warmers and just there at church, but they're not utilized per se with their talents. And I just feel like as Christians and people who have the talents that God has given us, we should be using that to His glory. And so no matter what profession you are, whether, for instance, like in my case, if you're in the art and animation or design field, you can still use that to help with church things. And if you're in the medical field, you can still help with going out into the community and creating programs with the church to help continue using your talents with church. And so we need to do a better job helping that, because then it can help other younger people who aren't into that field yet, and they're seeing older people who are actually using their talents for God. They can be more inspired, they can actually be more engaging, and maybe that can help more professionals kind of get their talents out and get other people to just join the church and also understand about their faith.
Okay, thank you so much. Craig, you look like you want to add your perspective.
Yeah, I want to add my perspective. I'm looking at the group here, and I'm guessing everybody's within about, let's say, early 30s to between 30 and 40 something, right? Roughly. So just looking at the group, I'm within that age range. Yeah. We come from a generation of Adventists where the young people weren't really, as you said, Edgar, our values or our opinions didn't really matter, right? But if you think about it, we are now the quote unquote old people in the church, the mature people in the church. So the problems like what Adrian highlighted, or the opportunities that I can't remember her name, Lauren? Yeah, Lauren said that we're missing. I think those come back to us as the church body, because we are the church, right? And it's all about inclusion and ownership. Those are two things that I think that the young people need. I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about the ones that we are looking at coming up, the preteens, the 20-somethings. What they're looking for is inclusion. They want to come to church and not just sit down. Ownership means they're given an opportunity to not say run, but participate in the service or to lead out in the service. These two factors, these two items will kind of help the young people latch on or become like want to come to church, because I have something to do. I've seen it in my local congregation, where the young people, they seem a little bit disconnected, but as soon as you have youth Sabbath and they have something to do, everybody's at church early because they have something to do and they are happy to participate and they are glad that you ask them to do it. But if you don't include them in the service, they tend to be a little bit, okay, church day, I'm coming, they're gonna sit, they're gonna be there, and yeah, but we have to include them in our service. So the question was raised, is our church doing enough? The question goes back to you. Are you doing it because you are the church? Are you finding a way to get your church involved in the I guess driving while black? I mean, I can't really relate to the whole BLM because of where I'm from. I was in the United States recently, and I went to the home of Dr. King. I was in Atlanta. It was in Atlanta, and I went around, and a lot of the things that would strike a nerve to Americans had no residual effect on me because I didn't grow up within the context of that happening. I see people as just people, black, white, doesn't matter who you are. So in a way, yes, in my situation, I'm a little bit disconnected from that, but I understand what you're saying. The church needs to be a part of the movements, but we are the ones that are currently in charge in church right now. We are the Sabbath school secretaries, we are the deacons, we are the elders. We are the ones that can make that decision. We don't have to wait for the older ones because we are the older ones.
Well, you're raising an interesting perspective there, Craig. I came back from the general conference session earlier, just a few months ago. On the floor, as I looked at the delegates, I try to get a sense of who is really representing the church now. And there were lots of issues concerning allowing the younger people to lead in the church. They did share some statistics. They looked at the average age of the leadership at the general conference, and elected persons, they were averaging somewhere in the region of 62 years of age. Now the church, and one of the reasons why I call you folks to participate in this program, because you are young professionals. Craig used the term 30s. So let me go from 25 to 42 in that region there. When you look at the leadership of the church on a global level, it's much older than that. How do you feel about that as younger people?
I think it's frustrating. I think it's very frustrating because like I personally know I was a part of a church, and I went in the church, and came into the church, and I met the pastor before I went to the church. And so a friend introduced me to the pastor, and the friend is telling him my experience working in ministry. And I come into the church. I'm not the only young person. I'm not the only young adult in the church. But because the pastor has the experience from a word of a friend who was another pastor, he instantly puts me to work. And there are other young people in the church before I even came there who wanted to. There's one guy I was talking to, we talked personally. He said, man, I really want to be involved. I'm shy, but I really want to be involved in, even if it's reading a scripture, but he hadn't had opportunities. And I think the struggle and the issues that I personally have seen in my experience is that there are people my age and younger who want to be involved and want to be participant and want to be a part of the decision-making, because the church isn't an age, right? The church is a body of believers who come together to worship God, and we all are equal. And so I may not be 62, but I have experience. You know, I have a relationship with God. So I think it's the same people my age and younger have the knowledge and the wisdom and the experience to contribute to the movement of the church. And I think it's just frustrating when, you know, the average age is 62, you know, when we have so many people, pastors even who aren't at the level of where they can, they're given an opportunity to give input at that level. So it is very frustrating.
Okay, anybody else wants to react to that?
And also just want to add to what Adrian was saying, and I think it would also be echoing to what Lauren had mentioned earlier on. I think it's also even goes the importance of including and that diversity, like in terms of participation in the church and leadership in the church. It also just goes beyond the mere fact that, you know, as youth want to be part of the church, part of the, you know, the leadership and part of the participation, but it also helps us grow. It's different when you just come to church as a young person over and over and just seeing things done. It more or less becomes a formality, or like almost like a ritual thing that you kind of do every Sabbath. But when you become a part of it, when you take ownership in the activities of the church, when you take ownership in the mission of the church, reaching out to people, reaching into your fellow brethren within the church, when you allow that opportunity, when you become an active part of that process, I think it also draws you closer to Christ. It also, like, you know, reminds you of the purpose of your purpose as an individual and the purposes of the church as a whole, and that, you know, and that mission that God, you know, that Jesus Christ assigned to us, the mission to reach out to everybody. I think being a part of it and being an active part of that is something that is not only important just for us as young people, but for the salvation and for the spread of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Thank you so much. I want to. There are a couple of questions, but before we take a question from the audience, I want to get to something else here. Just directly, from where you stand, what would you like to see the church do more of? I want you to think seriously about this. I'd like to hear from as many of you as possible. What's in you, if you were to think of something that you consider to be very important that the church isn't really doing? Well, I believe Lauren already mentioned she wants to see more involvement in social activism, you know, that kind of thing. But the rest of you, what one thing would you want to see the church do more of?
I personally had the experience during my time at Oakwood University to be a part of ministry, you know, during the entirety of my college years. And I started to see the importance of Sabbath not being just a time to be in the pews, but to be out in community. I feel that there is an overemphasis on the need to like be inside of a church, singing hymns every Sabbath, listening to a sermon. And this might sound a little crazy, but there are times back at my home church in Maryland where the first week Sabbath of every month, they would have small groups where the designated families, if in a certain, square radius or square mileage, however you want to say it, who are in a certain area would meet together in homes. They would do outreach together. And, it just was a time to kind of break down. Sometimes churches are really large. Break down, the largeness of a church where you sometimes can get lost in the pew and be able to interact. And that allowed people to branch out and do more ministry. Sometimes I feel like the tradition of sitting down in church and having the communion with each other every Sabbath is nice, but it makes us a little bit just kind of kept to ourselves. And sometimes it's better, I think, to be able to get out of the pew and understand that church is a body of believers wherever 2 or 3 are gathered. Doesn't necessarily need to be in a physical building, but getting out and doing more outreach together. So that's my personal opinion.
Okay, I almost want to react to that right now. But let's hear the rest of you before we do that.
I mean, she said exactly what I was getting ready to say. I really wanted to say that too, but I will add a little bit onto that though. Other than we know that community outreach should be one of the top priorities of what we should do. Meeting the needs of those who are in need is literally part of our ministry. The Bible talks about that a lot as well. We tend to find ourselves at the church and getting to know too many of the people that we are familiar with, and we need to start to talk to and minister to people with those we don't know as much, because once again, that is our way of mission. That's our way of also reaching out to people and to helping them understand about Christ. Another thing that's kind of dear to me as well is that we need to also help meet the needs of those in the professional realms that would love to be a part of church service. The young people, we should help them get more involved. A lot of the older people in the church, I know, especially in Haitian and Caribbean churches that I've been to, they tend to kind of shield that position to themselves, and they don't want to kind of grant that position to young people sometimes. And I think that's kind of where we have a little issue there, because I know a lot of young people really want to be a part of ministry itself, and also that could be an inspiration for other young people who are also watching church service as well, and they want to be a part of that. I know personally for me, when it comes to like the media ministry itself, I feel like churches who are in charge of funds for the media ministry should pour more into that, so that young professionals who want to be into the art and animation and to the graphics and all that stuff can actually be a part of that more. So it's just little things like that here and there that we have to see more of to get more people engaged and younger people involved, so that the ministry can go forward. So a little bit of both service to outreach, and also young people getting more involved.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wants to add?
I have something to add, even though I had social justice before. I would like to see more things that are applicable to the demographic of a large group of people. So for instance, student loans are a really big thing that we just got $10,000 forgiven. If people can talk, I don't know if people do like Dave Ramsey, how to get out of debt, or classes on people who are looking to buy their first homes, like how to navigate all of that, or even people who may not be in their profession right now or trying to get into a different profession, like professional services. I think there's a lot of things that would be useful, and sometimes we don't really know where to go to look for help. And it would be nice if we could find information about those things within the church.
Okay, interesting, very interesting. There is a question that Craig, you were about to say something?
Yeah, because I'm an elder, right? A lot of times, and this is hinging on what Lauren said. A lot of times when you come to church, and also Carol, when we come to
Okay, it appears that there is a,
church, we come to church and expect to hear a sermon. Am I breaking up?
yes, you are
Okay.
breaking up.
Can you hear me?
I go ahead again, let's hear you.
Oh, okay. I was wondering. Oh, I was saying, because I'm an elder and I'm normally in church, right? We normally come to church and expect to hear a sermon. So I think not necessarily moving from sermons, but go to more teaching as opposed to sermonizing, which would kind of help Lauren's situation where you can have instruction on something that is practical, applicable. When I was growing up, what kind of kept me going was Wednesday night discussion. When we went to Wednesday night discussion, it was a totally different story to Sabbath morning church, because those gentlemen that we used to have used to really thrash out these issues, like go down to the nitty gritty, and you'd see them as if they're arguing, but at the end of it all, they would come to one consensus. And it was, for me, that is how I learned a lot of what I know. Right. And this is just me growing up. So yes, I hear the cry for the young people. They want more topics that are applicable or relevant times, for this time. And you're right, not just coming to church every Sabbath and sitting down is enough anymore. We need to be out and about, or as I say, in small groups, work together, because a lot of people get lost in the crowd on Sabbath morning.
Let me
But if we are out in a smaller group of persons, something.
okay. Thanks, Craig. Let me ask this question. I believe it was Carol who spoke first. And on this issue of how we utilize Sabbath mornings. I would like to hear your perspective on worship and the role of worship in the life of the Christian. The church is not the building, it's not the activity that takes place on Sabbath morning. Craig, I believe you said it earlier, the church is the people. And it means that church exists 7 days a week. So in terms of ministry, I do agree that we're supposed to have a strong emphasis on community outreach. I believe the church is strongest when we get into the community, when we are actively involved there. But I'd like to hear your concept of worship and that role that it plays in the life of the Christian. But before that, let me ask this, because I do want to hear from our viewers, and somebody's asking here. Does a person have to wait for the church to give them opportunity to do ministry, or allow the Spirit of God to give guidance and finding fulfillment in service? That's a question. There's another that I want to get at, but that's a question first. Here somebody's asking, do we have to really wait on the church to give us opportunity to do ministry, or as members of the church, can we be engaged outside of the organized system of doing ministry? Let's go to Paula for this one.
Yes, thanks, Pastor. The short answer is no, we don't have to necessarily wait on the church to organize ministry for us. As individuals, we have been called to be like Jesus and follow Jesus' example. And Jesus, when he walked upon this earth, he would have ministered to people, met their needs, etc. And so as individuals, we can do that. But the church also has a function, and it has the opportunity to create avenues to allow its members to utilize their different gifts to minister to the needs of people within the community. So no, we don't have to wait on the church, but the church should also facilitate ministry for its members.
Okay, very well said. Very well said. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next question now. This is a question that directly involves youth. It says, how do these distinguished youth relate to the postmodern phenomena? So they're asking you, how do you relate to the postmodern phenomena? Who wants to be the first to go with that?
Can you elaborate?
Yes, go ahead, Adrian.
No, I was asking, can you elaborate?
Can I elaborate? Well, because I didn't ask a question, but I do believe they're thinking in terms of things such as, these days there is a move towards pluralism. There's a move towards acceptance of various norms and standards. There is not the concept of just accepting what is decreed from above. But people are standing up, they're asking questions. Folks think that it is important that there is inclusion, there is involvement. These are concepts that the postmodern mind looks at. So I think the question that the viewer is asking, and if the person can elaborate, because I may not even be interpreting their question correctly. But for now, I think that's the slant. All of you look very tense. As you think, yes, go ahead, Carol.
Yes, so my perspective may differ from others, but I do believe that there is an importance of knowing and understanding something for yourself. I think one big issue that happens growing up sometimes in the church is that we are told to believe something because that's what we believe. So on the one hand, knowing and understanding for yourself, not just following blindly, is important. I think the church sometimes, or even us as members of the church, get into a bit of a pickle in trying to blend in. I think sometimes in our desire to be approachable, we sometimes miss the mark of some of the reasons why we should stand out. And I will say that, for instance, take the topic of absolute truth. That's a topic that is becoming very dicey in the church, because it's like, well, how do we really know something is true? How do we know that we should believe that? Is absolute truth even something that is relevant today? And it becomes a slippery slope. And so I don't think that one should shy away from postmodern thought and understanding it, because understanding it is a way to be able to approach people and talk about these topics. I think though sometimes as a church, we get a little bit too comfortable with blending it. That's my perspective.
Now, I think I hear somebody commenting. Did I? No? Okay, I want to squeeze in at least another question. I'm looking at the time, we have about 6 more minutes. And I really want to there are lots of other issues for us to talk to. Some next week, the group next week will have some other things, but I want to get your perspective on this. I'm interested really in hearing your views on some of the social challenges. Somebody was talking about postmodernism just now, social challenges that are current in the world today. How do you think the church should relate to issues such as abortion, political involvement of members, the LGBT community? Let's get your views on some of those quickly. Edgar?
Ooh, that's a tough question you're asking there. But we as a Seventh-day Adventists, we have to understand that as much as, just like Karen was saying earlier, as we don't want to be a part of a certain group or we don't want to be a part of something that we know for a fact the Bible explains, that we shouldn't be a part of, but we have to understand that we can still love someone And you already know where I'm going, where I'm particularly talking about just for one of the topics as of those who are are one of the different, people who believe in a different sex, or people who, identify themselves as something different. First and foremost, I like to say, we have to understand, no matter what person, wherever their lifestyle is, whatever, sin they may be a part of, we have to understand Christ's love. Because even us as sinners, if he had enough love for us, we should have that same love for other people. Now, there's a difference between loving someone and supporting and accepting what they do. As people who believe in the Bible, we have to understand where there's a line being drawn. And for that perspective, we have to just understand that God will take care of that situation, as long as we do our part. As long as we love that person, as long as we understand, okay, this is not what we're supposed to support, but as long as we love that person, God will give us the words we need to say, or the things that we need to do, which will impress on that person's heart to understand where they need to be, rather than completely going, okay, we're going to shun them out. We're going to just, okay, we don't believe this. We're going to, kick you out of everything. We're going to just, not even believe you exist or anything like that. And I think that's the wrong way to approach it. Other social topics we're dealing with, we can talk about, like, for instance, we're just saying the George Floyd situation, and situations of racism and stuff like that. I kind of look back into the story of the early church, and I remember understanding that even the people of the early church were kind of like a part of the abolitionists who were who agreed that slavery was wrong and all that stuff. So there's certain things that make sense in a way where, if our human rights, and it's also, which is against what we believe in, if it's something that's hurting us as our way of life, there's a way we can support that. But if it's pretty much is against God's law, there's a way we can also approach that as well. So it does get dicey. It's very, how shall I say, taboo, but as long as we understand God's word first, and we understand also God's love, from there is our base. That's where our foundation, our starting point is. And then from there, we can tackle those issues ahead. So it's something that, even for me, I would say personally, I'm still working on and understanding for all sorts of topics of our social issues. But as long as I understand in faith of where we are as a people, and where where I kind of start from there, and I think that's where God can lead me into understanding, where to support, what not to support, and everything else like that.
Okay, wonderful. Does anybody have a different view from Edgar? Okay, it looks like Carol.
So it's not quite a different view, but I want to give a perspective. So we recently had the death of a monarch. The Queen of England passed away. And the social media status or post that the Adventist church put out was talking about the monarch who believed in her faith and things like that. What is the purpose of such a statement? Truthfully, like what do we gain from putting out a post like that for someone who, yes, as a sovereignty, is known for the raping and pillaging of many countries, of subjugating minorities, things like that. So for me, it's not so much a different perspective from Edgar, but I want to know, what is our purpose when we approach these topics? What do we stand to change or to gain? What do we want people to know that the Adventist church, or as an individual, I as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, believe when I approach the topic? I think sometimes we get very muddled in, well, I need to speak and I need to say something so that, so that I have a voice. What is your voice trying to say? What, as a Black woman who is of Caribbean descent, but was born and raised in America, I have a very, very interesting, awkward, painful approach to Black Lives Matter because my parents don't understand it. They don't know what they can't relate to what I've experienced as a Black woman here in America, but it's very much so applicable to my life as someone who interacts and works with people in the LGBT community. Sorry, I missed a few letters, I apologize. I have to know how to interact with people because I cannot be disrespectful. I have patients who are of this orientation. I have to know how to talk to them. But then when they ask me about my faith, I have to be honest and say what I believe. So I think it's important to have a voice, but why are you speaking? What are you trying to say when you're saying or approaching these topics? That's all I have to say.
I'm sorry that our time has expired because you've raised some very interesting perspectives there, you know. I mean, and I heard you saying we don't just want to be politically correct. We should have a purpose for what we're doing. So the death of the monarch, yes, we can acknowledge it, but is anything wrong with saying, you know, using the opportunity to highlight the impact of slavery on our movement? That's what I hear you saying. But I look up at the time and I realize that our time has expired. And it's sad that the time has expired because I would really want to pursue that trend of thought there. But we only had 1 hour and it is gone. So I have to say thank you all very much. Somebody looks like they have a burning desire to say something else. I'm going to give all of you, I'm going to take just a few extra minutes. I know those on Second Advent Radio are going to lose us now, but I'm going to take a few extra minutes. We have another program coming up at 4:30. For those of our viewers, our Family Life program culminates this afternoon at 4:30. You want to stay tuned for that one. But I want to take a few more minutes just to ask the rest of you to react to what Khalil just stated.
Hi.
Go ahead. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, I mean, I think Carol said a lot of what I was thinking and wanted to mention in what she said and how we approach these social issues.
Just be real direct because our time is expired,
yes.
So make it short.
Yes. One thing is, let us also not forget the very basics of what God taught us. Like sometimes when we approach these issues, we have to ask God for his wisdom. We have to pray for wisdom and understanding. If these were easy issues, we would have all the answers for them right now, but they're not easy issues. These are issues where we need to really approach through prayer and through studying the word of God and asking him to give us the wisdom and how to approach these issues. Yes.
Okay. Well said. Well said.
I was going to say that we should be true to our identity, and someone being different doesn't threaten that. So responding how Christ would respond, the woman being caught in adultery did not threaten the identity of who Christ was. That makes sense. She legitimately was caught in adultery. It wasn't fiction, it was fact. But his response to her was one of compassion. So I think, like Khalil said, like the issues that we respond to, like, is what we have to do. If what we have to say is important and it's valid and it's going to impact in a positive way or shed light in some way, absolutely, we must speak out and stand up for those things. But if not, we must be quiet.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Pastor. I would just say the church needs to stand on the side of truth and love the sinner, but not the sin. Allow God to do, through the Holy Spirit, work upon the lives of those individuals.
All right. Let me drop down to Craig. I know you have Pathfinders.
All right. Just like Adrian said, we got to be true to our identity. Correct. We have to actually, with regards to, and I got this question in my Sabbath school class a couple of weeks ago, and it's all about tolerance, right? We don't have to, how should I, support their behavior when we're talking about the LGBT community, I'm sorry if I mispronounce the letters, we rearrange them, but they're still individuals in need of God's love. They're still a soul to be saved. right? When it comes to abortion, it's all, well, what I normally use science to, when I'm discussing, and appeal to a person's morals and the science behind it, instead of trying to say, thou shalt not kill, right? So there is a way to do it that you have to be like wise and harmless, but still make sure you stay true to your Adventist, what we believe. That's what I would say.
Okay.
I just want to add real quickly that because we believe the 7 days of the Sabbath and we hold strongly religious liberties, and we expect those religious liberties and freedoms to be extended to us so that we can practice what we believe is the interpretation of the Bible, we have to allow other people to be able to reject that same interpretation, because God does not force himself on people. So we can't say, hey, you're going to have to do it how I say it is, because the way I view the Bible is correct. So we also have to remember religious liberty doesn't extend to just us, but to also other people.
Thank you so much. Folks, our time has expired. I want to thank you for sharing with us very interesting perspectives. Wish we had more time. I see at least one of our viewers has messaged me personally to say we don't have enough time, but that's the time we have. And so I want to thank you. I want to remind all viewers that next week we continue. We are going to be talking to another set of 7 Adventist young professionals who we will examine some and other sorts of issues. Be sure to join us at 3 p.m. next Sabbath afternoon. Again, I say to our viewers that at 4:30 on SLC Adventist, there will be the Family Life program, Family Resilience. You're asked to tune in. Thank all of you so much. May God bless you, success in your various professions, and keep faithful by the grace of God.
Thank you, Pastor Greene.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.